When I had these initial psychedelic experiences, it took that quality and just cranked the volume to 11, where it was like the visionary element of this was so predominant. It was beyond anything that my imagination had conjured up. It was such a graceful flow state transmission of creative communication. I was in this continuity of consciousness that was just unfolding in front of me in such a refined way that it was this ebb and flow between concentration and wonder and amazement and witnessing. We're here for so much greater potential than we even have the imagination for, and live a life that keeps you in contact with that, and it will reveal itself in time.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Creativity and Consciousness podcast. In this episode, I'm joined by my friend and visionary artist Luke Brown, also known as Spectralize. If you're watching this on video, you might notice that the video is a bit out of sync with the audio at times. I honestly couldn't really be bothered to fix it because I consider podcasts to be a mostly audio-based medium anyways, and you're probably listening to this while you're drawing or on your treadmill or doing something creative. So I think it's fine as it is. This conversation was still potent, and I hope you'll enjoy it. Luke Brown is an intrepid explorer of consciousness and creativity, and one hell of a painter, often referring to himself as a professional hallucinator. He's part of a new generation of visionary artists who are reconstructing the cultural templates we once knew. His art speaks deeply to the spiritual mysteries of the human imagination, often emerging from dreams, mystical experiences, medicine journeys, and channeled dialogues with the source of creativity itself. He weaves both digital and traditional mediums to create colorful, living symmetries that feel like multidimensional maps, charting the spaces beyond ordinary perception. Luke is currently teaching alongside me here at the Bali Painting in Paradise retreat, which I organized for this time of October 2024, and we're in the midst of it right now. This episode is a glimpse into the mind of someone who is redefining art as a spiritual medium for growth and transformation, a psychedelic wordsmith who always has ample inspiration to share. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Creativity and Consciousness podcast, a space to explore the intersection of creativity, spirituality, and personal transformation. I'm your host, Jake Coburn, visionary artist, author, and your humble guide in the exploration of our consciousness. In each episode, we dive into ideas related to magic, visionary art, and alternative spirituality. I bring you conversations with leading thinkers and innovators to help us tap into our creative potential, expand our minds, and transform our lives. Whether you're an artist seeking inspiration, a spiritual seeker exploring new paths, or someone on a journey of self-discovery, this podcast is here to help unlock new possibilities and awaken our inner power. Let's journey beyond the ordinary. Welcome to the Creativity and Consciousness podcast.
So what do you need to know?
Should we do 3 ohms or
Sure.
something? I don't know. I feel like you need to bang a gong, or it's always weird to start these things and end them. That's we need some kind of big signal of beginning. All right.
Let's go.
That was it. Cool. So yeah, it's awesome to have my visionary brother, Luke Brown, here today. We're in the middle of teaching this painting retreat here in Bali, and Luke's been a friend and an inspiration of mine for a long time. Was definitely one of the artists that I first encountered on my visionary art journey that really showed me what was possible with just, the crazy things that you can do with paint. That really blew my mind and continue to blow my mind to this day. So,
well, we're in the mind-blowing business.
Yep.
That's what I'm here for.
The mind-blowing business. And I thought we'd do this kind of experiment today for the podcast. You and I have had a few conversations already. So I pulled some tarot cards before you got here, and I pulled the Lust card, which is kind of like the Leo archetype, the Moon card, and the hermit. And so I want to try and use those cards to sort of frame the direction of the conversation.
Cool. I like the sound of that.
Yeah. So the lust card, it's Leo. It's about confidence, boldness, self-expression, really. So I guess to start on that vein, I'm curious about just like really what inspires you and what drives your creativity, like what gives you motivation, what ignites that spark within you that keeps you going as an artist.
I mean, I love this feeling of connection that happens through the sharing of my art and the feedback of what people receive from what I'm doing is really encouraging and reinforces this feeling of, the Dharma duty. This isn't just a novelty or a hobby or just some way to pass the time, but it's like there's a deeper purpose behind it, that it's like so much of what I'm doing is conveying something really, is really significant for me and seemingly for other people, some, a channeling of some higher dimensional expression of the sentience of the universe is making itself known and expressing itself, and I'm making myself available for whatever that voice is, even if I don't understand what it's saying until I create, and then I realize what the message is. And yeah, that's a big motivator, feeling like I have some kind of assignment to translate something that people are experiencing but don't have the capacity to convey it, let alone in words, than a craft or an artistic expression. And a lot of reflections I receive is, this feeling of accuracy, that I'm representing something that they're familiar with, but they didn't realize until they saw it how synonymous it was with something that they've experienced internally or in some medicine ceremony or something. And so that's something that motivates me, makes me feel like I have a duty or an assignment being given to me that I need to be attentive to. And also just the magic of the process that is so deeply personal and so revelatory and so reflective of, a kind of just like a higher dimensional language that is I'm just making myself available for. And there's so much incredible synchronicity and symbol-rich meaning occurring in that process that unless you're in a similar flow state, you might not know what that is. But for me, it's just like one of the highest forms of magic, and that I'm totally here for it. And it informs so much about the way that I operate in life and the way that I move through the world and interact with the world is informed by that process. So no matter what, I'm going to be doing it, whether I'm supported by it or whether it's received in a positive way or not. I'm committed to that. There's like a really deep transmission of communication going on that's really, really special and really magical.
Yeah, when you were sharing about your story and journey as an artist yesterday in the slideshow presentation that you gave, there's really this sense of fate or destiny or just these synchronicities that seem to have occurred for you in your life that kind of have revealed this purpose or this path for you as an artist.
Yeah.
And I've been focused a lot lately in my studies and reflection on just that idea that the soul has a teleology, that there's this sense of fate and direction and purpose that's within each of us, and that there are higher intelligences that have an invested interest in us following that. And the more we listen to that, sort of the smoother things go. Like Aleister Crowley said, a man who is following his true will has the inertia or momentum of the entire universe behind his back. And it seems for you, like you were talking about this story of how you almost had a breakdown when you were a tattoo artist and almost lost your ability to create. And that was like a big wake up call to where you weren't listening to your soul's calling, and it kind of reoriented you back into your path as an artist. But I thought we could just riff on that. And if you wanted to share a little bit about your story with that. And I'm also curious if that purpose or that calling was always readily available, or if that's something that was ever something that was in question for you, or something that was hard to find, because I know a lot of people struggle with discovering that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, that the support for this direction in life was seemingly always there, but I didn't have the message from within myself to move in that direction until, I really awoke to my mission and my purpose and my just the confidence to move in that direction. But something about this process and this commitment to living my life as an artist and trusting that the ground will appear before me as I step has been just radically revelatory. And letting go of the tattooing and moving into an expression of creativity that was less confined and dependent on other people's imagination of me, and what, being accountable to other people's ideas, really opened it up to a whole new dimension of possibility. And just being open to the conduit and where the conduit leads. And when you're in a state of right alignment with your Dharma duty and feeling the support of all of existence, because you're in that state of mind-heart coherence in that creative process, and the byproduct of that is support. And I've seen that so clearly throughout my life, just being in this dedication to my craft. It's revealed itself in so many ways and so many affirmations that for me, it's about the condition and the quality and crafting my life to continue to point at that condition and that quality. And it's not just in my creative process, which I consider to be essentially a spiritual practice, but, just getting the message that must apply to every area of my life, and in my diet and my movement habits and my exercise and my relationship to my health, my physicality and my geography and what I surround myself with, and being around supportive, life affirming characters. It's all about just setting the stage for every quality in my life to be pointing at and supporting this condition that I'm choosing to maintain, that my art is a byproduct of that condition. And it's been a really miraculous revelation of that it's that by just adhering to that, miracles happen. And the way that I relate to my creative process is about just maintaining a connection to that miraculous potential.
Could you share that story that you shared yesterday about, I guess, kind of like your dark night of the soul, when you almost lost the ability to make art and it led to you becoming who you are today and what you're doing? But I can imagine that was also very challenging for you.
It was definitely one of the most existentially, painfully challenging experiences in my life, to feel a potential of my creative ability being compromised, and that coming about from really not listening to myself or listening to that higher voice, and just continuing to follow a path that was motivated by, when I was tattooing, it was such a financial safety net. It was always there for me. It was something that I could travel with. It was something that was appreciated and acknowledged, and just It was very guaranteed. And at the same time, something deep within me was feeling really unsatisfied with it and felt like I was not living up to a potential that was way bigger than that I was not moving in the direction of out of fear of not being as supported. But just feeling that voice getting louder and louder as the years progressed and feeling like I'm going to have to make a change. I'm going to have to move in another direction. I'm going to have to implement some courageous new directions in life. And yet I wasn't following that. And I was kind of falling back into the comfort that this is something that's guaranteed and supported. And by not acting boldly in this other direction, my body made sure that I acted in this direction by bringing me to a place where I was severely compromised with a state of accumulative pain developing in my joints and my forearm, like a kind of repetitive stress, carpal tunnel type effect that was not only physically painful, but just the implications that I was maybe not being able to do what I'm here to do was even more painful. And so that prompted some deep reflection and deep contemplation of my direction. And I felt that in order to really get to the heart of what this is, because some part of me felt like this isn't just a physical thing that's happening, that's just a result of me, developing an accumulative pain physically. There was something much deeper within this that I really wanted to get to know and acknowledge and overcome. And I felt that psychedelics had helped me so dramatically in the past to really get to the nucleus of an issue and unavoidably face parts of me that I wasn't willing to acknowledge. And I felt that this was a time that required great courage to address, because this felt like such a challenging impasse in my life. And so I chose to take this path of a significant dosage of psilocybin to really, eject myself out of the minutia, the detail of my life, but just summon a larger perspective of what's happening. And that it did. It really brought me into a place of just seeing a depth in the subconscious and in the unconscious that was acquiescing personal power outside of the self and giving in to an acquiescing of personal power and divine spiritual sovereignty that was expressing itself as a kind of self-sabotaging, seeing a kind of matrix of language embedded in the self that was also totally transpersonal. I didn't see it related to my upbringing or to my life at the time, or not being supported by my family or my environment. It was something that was...
It's like a cultural myth.
It was lineages deep and incarnations deep. And so seeing that from that perspective allowed me to have more compassion for it and not be so identified with it personally. I could see that it's just embedded in the collective. And so that granted me this opportunity to just not be gripped by the shame of it or the fear of it. I could just see it for what it was, that it's just part of the human experience that is afraid of its own potential, that it would rather, just acquiesce that to an external source. And I could see it in the form of this kind of self-sabotaging language that had created a kind of vice-like grip around my main implement, my hand, that was actively creating in the world was compromised with severe pain. And so being able to be granted this hyper-dimensional vision into the fascia and the tendons and the ligaments and the muscle fibers, and see that the continual subconscious languaging that was informing my imagination of myself had infused itself into me physically, and accessing that place of compassion and forgiveness and love past the personal quality of that into the collective quality of that was this opportunity to just love it and forgive it from within and release the tension and just allow it to lose its supremacy over my imagination and my life. And having come to that place of reconciliation and revelation in that experience, there was an immediate byproduct into my life that followed that experience through a set of circumstances that came in the form of the rehabilitation and the support. It came in the form of incredible characters that I needed to meet that had the pertinent life perspective. And, it came in the form of this incredible artist that just offered all the tools I needed to step into the next level of my expression. It came in the form of Photoshop and flatbed scanners and drawing tablets that were easy to work with, and a desktop computer, and everything I needed to act upon this new vision that was granted to me in that experience. And so I see that as, in terms of the holographic imaginatrix, reflecting my imagination of myself, it came in this form to support my rehabilitation, and by being able to manifest the vision that I really was here to produce, it then brought me into this new arena of recognition and acknowledgement and inclusion into a new realm of possibilities with the artists that I had admired my whole life. They all of a sudden came into the picture and were acknowledging me for my skill and my ability to translate this ineffable dimension of beauty and psychedelic phenomena. And so it's just another kind of affirmation and reiteration that there's a quality here that I just need to be attentive to on the deepest level of being, is based on my imagination of myself first and foremost, and that life will reflect that and agree with that no matter what it is. If I'm believing that I'm here to suffer unnecessarily and starve and go through immense challenge, existence will say, yes, I agree, here you go.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm, graduated from that perspective of self and I'm here to thrive and be abundant and be supported for being in my fullness of my creative potential, the existence is going to say, yes, I agree. Here's all the conditions that are agreeing with you. And so that was the big revelation of that experience, above and beyond the gifts that were given to me from graduating and reconciling that experience. The real nucleus of it was like, where is your imagination of yourself? What are you believing about yourself? What are you here for? How do you step into your Dharma duty with confidence and what are you doing to personally empower yourself and override the density of illusion that you're embedded in that is telling you differently,
Mm-hmm.
like where. So yeah, that was a big revelation for me that has just put me on a very miraculous path with my art. And so it just emphasized, like, this is where my attention needs to be. This is where my priorities are. My creative process is a bridge to that spiritual discipline, is like hinging on that. As long as this is where my attention is, everything else will just find its place with grace.
Yeah, it sounds like you had some kind of ancestral programming that you need to sacrifice this higher purpose just for the sake of survival, and that by unraveling that and sort of transmuting that, it allowed you to access this higher purpose, that this character that you're destined to play within the unfolding collective narrative, and that by
Common affliction in life.
Well, yeah, I bet there's, people listening to this right now that are in that, and so you were forced through pain to finally step into that, and I think sometimes if you don't listen to your soul's calling, like it'll get hard.
Yeah. How could I ever look back on that experience and the heartache and pain and existential despair that I was brought to? How can I look at that and be like, oh, how awful that happened? How terrible. It's like, wow, thank you for that opportunity for me to see it in that way. Thank you for bringing me to that the bottom of the pit, so that I had to do the work with conviction and authenticity to, really, acknowledge what's really going on. Thank you for that opportunity. What a wonderful experience to have had. So how can anything that comes to me from this point on that is also in that, that vein, how can I look at that and be like, oh no, this is what a terrible thing to be happening? Instead, it's like, okay, what's the purpose of this? What's the meaning behind this? I'm available for this experience because it's happening, and it's just brought me to a place of receptivity to challenge in another way that can expedite the process of transformation, because I can see that's something that was so painful was my greatest gift in life, and brought me into an experience of life that is in the realm of, the highest form of dreaming and opportunity. I'm so thankful for it. So yeah, it's just kind of sped up a process of further transformation whenever challenge comes along, to not shy away from it or hide from it or wish it wasn't happening, but to just be present for it and acknowledge that it's all for my highest good, even if it doesn't look like that in the moment.
Yeah, I think those adversarial forces within our own personal lives and stories are essential, and they're essential for all stories. It's like the stories we love, there's always challenges that are put in places, those kind of wrong turns or whatever obstacles that the characters face that they need to overcome in order to reach their full potential. And life will set up those challenges that ultimately teach you and give you strength. But I'm curious, so I mean, there could be people listening to this right now that are kind of stuck in that position where things seem hard and not aligned with this kind of magical synchronistic unfolding of destiny like you might describe. So I'm curious if you have any advice for someone who might be in that position about how they can better listen to those whispers or callings of their soul that will guide them to their ultimate destiny to fulfill their purpose in life.
I mean, I don't think that I'm some kind of random anomaly or cosmic lottery winner in the matrix that's just, granted the golden road. I feel that it's a byproduct of a willingness to observe with a deeper sense of contemplation that reveals what is meant to be seen. And yeah, just there's been a lot of experiences that I've had through, mainly from, intentional medicine ceremonies with entheogens, that has reiterated something over and over of, a message of utmost importance that we are ultimately here to thrive and be our best, and that existence loves us unconditionally, and that unconditional love is accessible and available if we can address parts of our consciousness that is interfering with that signal. And just something about just the way my life has unfolded has brought that to my attention, and I've been brought to a level of awareness of the imperative importance of that, and by just integrating that, it reveals itself. And so, just being able to open oneself to the receptivity that there is a best interest in mind for us to really be the full embodiment of our infinite multidimensional potential is available within me. It's available within every human. And to really just be open to the work required to address and reconcile and relieve oneself of any distortions in the signal that are keeping us from that. And yeah, for me, my path as an artist has really instilled a deep spiritual priority in my life, and just feeling the presence of infinite sentient consciousness that we can call God, we can call source intelligence. It's given me an ability to have it as a present felt experience through this path that I've been on. And it's been the greatest gift I could ever imagine in life, is to have that interaction with that sentience and have that inform my life and my creative process and my way of moving through the world. And, I can't imagine like the level of existential suffering that exists without that. And so, yeah, just my advice is just to really maintain an openness and a receptivity to that possibility, that's what we are informed by, and that's what's informing this entire experiment of existence, in order to know itself as every possibility is orchestrated and moved forward by this unified mind of source intelligence, and that it is not something separate from the self. It is self itself, and that there is ultimately no individuated self that's separate from existence. And yeah, that's an interaction that I've had with that continuously in so many forms and variations, that it's now just a part of the operating system here. And it wasn't always the case. There was a time I felt very isolated and separate and misunderstood, and getting really over-identified with that and feeling that core wound of separation anxiety. And I'm gifted and beyond measure and grateful beyond belief for these opportunities and for these experiences to meet that and recognize I am that. And that's really the basis of my mode of operations. It's what's informing my creative process. It's informing every interaction I have. And it's a real present felt experience that is continually reiterated and affirmed through just the miraculous nature of my life. And so that's what I want to inspire and share through my art, that's what that is. And it's a big motivation for what I'm doing, to be of service through that, and the opportunity to just be upfront and open. If there's a receptivity to hear it, then I'll share it. If there's not, there's no obligation,
Yeah.
And yeah, that's been the greatest revelation and gift of this experience of living my life as an artist, and just being open to the infinite spectrum of possibilities with no guarantee, and residing only on trust that there is a best interest in mind for this life, and to just maintain an openness for that to communicate. And by maintaining that openness, it communicates. And that's just like the highest form of magic for me.
It sounds like at each of these crucial stages for you as an artist, you talked about your first psychedelic experience, like your first LSD experience, I think, when you were a teenager, and how that was a really revelatory moment for you, or also this high-dose psilocybin experience that helped heal and allowed you to recover and transform into your artist self now. That psychedelics have been really crucial for you in these moments of revelation. And I thought we could explore that a little bit as well. And I'm curious to hear more about how psychedelics have played an active role in your life, both as an artist and as a conduit for creativity, however that looks.
Well, my initial introduction to that was pretty early on, and it was really quite a dramatic experience. It was not a casual event, and seemed also to be much more multi-dimensional in what it was revealing to me than the people that I was surrounded by at the time. So it made me feel like, maybe I was just coming into this life with a particular orientation that was amplified by that. I've always been very, very visually oriented. It's like the most predominant part of this experience is like my ability to vividly imagine and see things. And that comes in the form of just really vivid, multi-sensory, multi-character, multi-plots within plots and subplots within subplots, dreaming ability, like waking up with so much content that is so vividly presented. That's been a part of my life in a big way. Or reading books and having a movie screen playing behind my third eye as I'm reading strings of adjectives describing something. I can see it really vividly. That was always a big part of it. Or if somebody's describing a story to me, as they're describing it, I'm vividly seeing it in my imagination. So I've had this particular kind of heightened ability in that way that I've come in with. And so yeah, when I had these initial psychedelic experiences, it took that quality and just cranked the volume to 11, where it was like the visionary element of this was so predominant, and I was just so enamored by it because it was beyond anything that my imagination had conjured up or been able to summon. It was, way bigger, and being surrounded by people that their description of their experience was not that. It was that they might have had some heightened color saturation, or the curtains might be undulating a bit, or the carpets might be shifting and pulsing. But for me, it was like densely packed with hallucinatory content on the surface of everything, and behind my eyelids was just a kaleidoscopic journey into the nucleus of being. So much subconscious material unfolding that was identifiable and emotionally relatable, and this motivation to find a way to convey what this was for me amongst them prompted me to just start drawing the duration of the night to try and share the impact of what it was that I was experiencing and seeing, and having this creative expression, this refinement of a craft all of a sudden just unfolding on the page in front of me and in front of my brother and his friends. And they've known me since I was a kid, and now here's this new dimension of expression is just pouring out of me throughout the night, mainly because I wanted to show them what it was that I was seeing and experiencing, and that kind of really instilling a sense of purpose and duty. It's like, wow, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to do this. I'm an artist. How could I have forgotten that? And I was always creative when I was a kid, but I never really considered myself an artist or committed to making a work of art. I would doodle, I would make little drawings in my math books. I would it wasn't really a commitment. I thought I was on an entirely different path that was going to lead me into acting or, something entirely different. But this fateful night was, revealing some deeper purpose that I felt a confidence in, that I felt like, okay, I need to commit to this. I need to explore this. I need to see what would happen if I keep doing this. And so, yeah, the following weekend, I decided I was going to be more intentional about it, and decided I wasn't just going to be in like a group setting, a party environment. I'm going to just go the distance alone and produce this work of art that was, just the entire process was such a magical act. And it was such a graceful flow state transmission of creative communication. I was in this continuity of consciousness that was just unfolding in front of me in such a refined way that it was this ebb and flow between concentration and wonder and amazement and witnessing, and eventually by the end of the night, not only was this process just deeply infused with revelation and symbol-rich meaning, and seeing and coming into contact with a deeper nature and a confidence in life, but I also had this work of art to prove that this was a real event. I was waking up the next day with the proof of the value of that experience, and so that really instilled something in me. And it was like, all right, I'm in this. I'm gonna just like be an artist. And yeah, I was also introduced to the culture of the Grateful Dead and this whole subculture of psychedelic revelatory event that was also instilled another level of confidence. It's like, wow, this isn't some isolated pocket that I've stumbled into. This is like a mass scale of culture is going on that is invested in this. And so that was a really rapid learning curve in life, because I was really into the music. I was really into the scene. I was going to just do whatever I could to see as many shows as I could. And then I was treating this artwork that was coming through me as a currency to sustain the ability to follow them and take it, and somehow taking so much time out of school and yet still graduating. I don't know how that happened, but yeah, just being a part of a larger psychedelic subculture was really, just instilled something in me. Like, there's an audience for this. There's a receptivity for this that isn't just some niche pocket. It's really big. And then that led to the rave culture, and in the late 90s, the warehouse parties, and a whole other variation of psychedelic culture. And then that, it just led one area to the next, and then into the trance music festival scene, which really became like the biggest, most receptive audience and the most supportive audience for what I'm doing. And that came about after, this kind of transformation out of my tattooing into a new level of being able to express the psychedelic dimension much more accurately, because I was integrating the tool of psychedelics, or the tool of Photoshop, I should say, and using psychedelics to learn those skill sets. And yeah.
Cool. This is the moon card, because the moon is the exploration of the subconscious mind, like the unseen realms. Pisces, like those kind of cosmic ethereal dimensions, which are both revelatory but also kind of cautiously, fraught with peril in their own way. And I'm curious, like, you're probably one of the most well-trodden psychonauts I know. And have you ever kind of speculated at what the nature of that dimension is, or when you're encountering these kinds of visions, entities, experiences, like, what is that? Is that like an aspect of your subconscious? Is this an archetypal dimension of the collective consciousness, or is that...
I would go with that.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, really, ultimately, there is no doer of action, no individuated self separate from the entirety of the dream of God that's experiencing itself as every possibility in order to know itself. And there's been lots of experiences that I've had that have brought me into the embodiment of that awareness, where there is no doer of action, just divine will that's experiencing itself as, infinity in a finite form. And just being in this opportunity to transcend the identification with anything that's being presented as otherness, or that, yeah.
But like the places you go in visionary realms, like, on DMT or ayahuasca, do you think that these are objective dimensions and realms of experience, like places that you can tune your consciousness into that are accessible and achievable objectively? Or do you think that it's like your own personal subconsciousness?
It's a collective dimension of non-physicality. And well, it's like even just talking about this kind of summons a quality of it that feels very psychedelic to me. Just an association when I tune into the experience, it kind of triggers the state in a way. Yeah, just ultimately the nature of the holographic imaginatrix in which we're co-creatively imagining into being really is made of dream stuff. It's consensually agreed upon illusory structures based on our innermost imagination of ourselves that we're co-creatively dreaming into being, and that there is only one of us here dreaming itself into separateness. And yeah, just accessing those dimensions of seemingly sentient awareness and expression is just the dreaming itself, and having these experiences of witnessing. Wow, I'm just like following his threads like into the ether here.
Perfect. Yeah. I like this idea of the artist as this kind of imaginaut, who has like a specialized role to kind of go into these dimensions, which I think are real. I just think that they're not real in the same way that we like to think of them. But in some ways, like that language and world of symbol is more real than our material world. It's like it's fundamental to it, and it's what everything is constructed from here in the material world. But the artist is kind of a shamanic journeyer who can go into these realms in a specialized way and access visions and information and epiphanies and realizations, and then construct something in this dimension that then it can be shared with the tribe.
Yeah, I think that I think of it in terms of like dimensional hierarchy or vibrational hierarchy.
Right, yeah, totally.
That the same qualities are applied in different levels of that vibrational hierarchy, but then it's the illusion of time that is influencing it in different ways. So ultimately we are dreaming this, and we're dreaming each other, and we're manifesting realities that reflect our imagination of ourselves, but there's this duration of time before that manifestation arrives, so we don't always associate the outcome with the thought. But as you move up into higher expressions of vibration, it's much more immediate, where the innermost imagination of self is immediately reflected into the environment, and just having these experiences that have some deep emotional engagement, and then seeing the tapestry of the environment and the content of the environment immediately reflecting that emotional expression, having it reflected back to you like a mirror. And if you're in a place of fear or anxiety, there's an immediacy of the manifestation of that fear or anxiety is like immediately present to reflect back to itself, and then finding a place of reconciliation and peace and ecstasy and love is then immediately reflected into the environment or the tapestry in which you're looking into. And so, yeah, just seeing a correlation there, and seeing through my own experiences the same things happening in this waking world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And dependent on your alignment with your commitment to a heart-mind coherence is going to determine the efficacy and the speed in which that's going to manifest.
Yeah, there's just like higher latency here in this dimension, whereas
if you're operating on a lower frequency, your bandwidth is so drawn out and flat that it's going to extend it way further out. But if you're operating on a higher sine wave, it's drawn to you much quicker and much more apparently reflective that what you're believing about yourself and imagining about your life and your possibility is going to present itself much more vividly and faster, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the interesting thing. If you try to describe like a DMT experience or something like that to someone who's never had a psychedelic experience before, it's not like you go out somewhere
elsewhere.
No, it's like that's literally here all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you're suddenly aware of, your consciousness is expanded to be able to hold a wider breadth of experience, like a higher octave of experience.
I also see it in terms of like, just expanding the bandwidth of perception. It's like all these radio stations are all occupying the same metaphysical space, but it's the radio that's going to tune from one signal to the next. And if you had a radio that can expand, you'll pick up on signals of a higher vibration. It's like they're all dimensions, all variations of experience, and they're all occupying the same metaphysical space. And it's just whether your personal attunement is expanding enough to pick up on a bigger signal. And that's been a big part of the experience. It's like just recognizing that's a process that's occurring. Like perception is just expanding to take in a higher frequency of perception.
Mm-hmm.
And
and sometimes it's hard work to get to that place too. Even
I've also learned how to regulate my nervous system to withstand some of those signals, because without it can be maddening, or it can be like hard on the nervous system. But there's been a kind of a message in there that it's important to live in a healthy way and have movement in the body and eat well and all these things, because that's all going to contribute to the capacity to be able to tune yourself into a higher vibrational signal without it distorting or just amplifying unprocessed shadow material in the collective. It's like, as long as I'm attending to all these things and living my life in a good way and just being attuned to my flow state and all these things, that's all going to be a contribution to be able to just receive messages and signals and be more intuitive. And not only being more intuitive, but having the sense to be able to recognize and act on intuition as well, as like a byproduct of being in that condition as well. And that's come in the form of just so many remarkable experiences of just like phenomenal messages and synchronicities in my life that I see that as also reflective of that work on myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess people just get cut off from their intuition through trauma and stuff like that. And that's part of that reclamation work, which can also come through the form of psychedelic experiences and things like that. But sometimes that purging work or clearing work with psychedelics or whatever can be really challenging. But that's why there's this element of kind of like courage or bravery of going into that stuff and being willing to go through those tough experiences to come out as a conduit on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of these experiences have given me so much more of a willingness to go deep, to take the time for contemplation and deep inner reflection, and be willing to look into areas that, into the corners of unprocessed shadow material, and forgive myself for my blind spots. And I think there's this incredible value in just operating that way. It kind of expedites your spiritual progress. You have that kind of radical self-referral and willing to look into
be honest with yourself.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And also just continually applying a deep forgiveness for yourself for having not seen what was there, and applying the same to others.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a really enormous spiritual tool to apply in life.
That lands well on the Hermit, which is kind of all about self-reflection. The qualities of Virgo, which is like discernment, but it's kind of like self-discernment too, like through our own inner reflection and of ourselves, our behavior, of how we fit into the world and how we affect other people. And I mean, would you say art is your main practice for self-reflection?
It's a predominant one. Yeah. There are waves that I go through. I think just the path that I've been on is just kind of really instilled something that is so much a part of the operating system now that I can just be attentive to whatever is coming up in the moment. And yeah, I think it's a whole package. It's a whole picture. And really it's like how to maintain that sense of inner connection and fluidity in the conduit, how to just be available for a higher dimension of intelligence to express itself. My creative practice has been a big part of that because there's being in that flow state dislodges the ego narrative that wants to contain and control and take ownership, and it just allows just creative genius to just be made available. And so that's been a radical revelation of what life is through that relationship with that. And I've prioritized that in my life, not just in my creating of art, but just keeping that in the forefront, like how to be as present as possible and not be sidetracked by realities that are not part of the present moments, like concerns of the future and regrets of the past and all these things that are, derailing the potential of the moment. Yeah, for me, just being in the creative process is such an amazing access to just the creative conduit that's informing all phenomena in existence. It's creativity itself. It's not my creativity. It's not, there's no ownership of it. It's just doing whatever I can in this life to just make myself available for that expression to be here in this world. And that's a deeply spiritual revelation, just being in that interaction with that and what it has to say and what it's like there are qualities of it that are beyond imagination. We don't even know what lies ahead of us in the potential of human creativity. It's ever increasing novelty, but the higher vibrational we can actively be attentive to being, the higher the potential of that creativity. So that's what I'm committed to and making myself available for. And it doesn't just apply to my painting. It applies to just how I interact with the world and what kinds of characters come into my life and what kinds of, qualities of experience I'm having. It's all relative to that.
And in addition to that is just this kind of emergent process of intuitively living your life in a specific way. Are there any specific practices that you uphold that help support that quality of awareness and attunement?
I love doing breath work. Yeah, that's been something and I go through phases with it where I'm really just excited about the discipline and the dedication of it, and things are really ramping up, and I feel this kind of accelerated process happening. And then there are times where that wanes and my attention's elsewhere. But what I've received and seen from those kinds of practices are with me, whether I'm actively engaged in that process or not. And same with a lot of these psychedelic experiences. It's like I'm altered forever from that. It's just embedded into the foundation of my operating system. I'm not reliant on them for, to stay tuned in or to get creative insight or inspiration. It's like they've done their work. I'm a different person than I was before those experiences. And yeah, just movement practices. I'm really into being just as active physically as I can be, and have, I'm really fascinated and interested in nutrition and what does what to the body, and how to be as optimal as possible through, nutritional satiety and And yeah, just all these things are just all part of a commitment to being in that flow state, being in that condition where, you know, creativity can flow unobstructed and genius can be made available in this world through the conduit of this biocrystalline monkey suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sounds like you've just organized your values in such a way that creativity and being of service to that is the pinnacle, like the kind of nucleus point that you've organized your whole life around, which, yeah, does take deep commitment, you know.
Well, I've seen the result of it. I've seen the byproduct of it, and I've seen how valuable and important that is. So it's not in the background that I need to find time for. It's like of utmost priority. And the commitment to that priority has provided just phenomenal life experience, and revelation about the nature of the hologram in which we're embedded has been presented to me through, you know, the dynamic interplay with that. And so, yeah, it's not a chore. It's not as much of a discipline. It's like an operating system.
Right. Just like a way of organizing your life.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you can share a bit about your creative process, like what goes into making a work of art for you.
Well, I've found that some of the highest genius occurs when I'm not trying to force anything. And I've learned to, you know, sometimes I wait for it. And I mean, there are other times where I appreciate the nudge or the motivation to make something happen. But I think some of the greatest stuff has occurred when it's like, it just appears. It's just like, wow, what an awesome idea. You know, I wasn't being like, okay, I need to come up with an awesome idea. Let me just start a process and see if I can get to it. Yes. Sometimes it feels like I'm kind of swimming upstream. And then there are times where I'm just like, okay, I'm just going to like really just be working on myself in this way, or I'm just going to like make an intention to move in a direction or attune to something. And sometimes it's a flash. It occurs to me. I'm like, I didn't think of that. That just presented itself. And then I'm like, okay, that feels really exciting. I really want to make that happen. And then I'll start the process. And then there's some, you know, all kinds of supportive elements start to come into play to make that happen, as if it already exists in the future and it's sent a shockwave back through time to plant the seed to move me towards it. And yeah, I've come to this place where I've established archives of launch points around me, where I've just, you know, amassed so many forms and textures and ideas and things that aren't necessarily finished compositions, but they're things that can kind of spark a direction. And yeah, so just coming up with ideas that just want to come through in the moment, that are not finished compositions or big plans. They're just ideas that will come through, some kind of weird little shape or face or texture or concepts. I'm just like coming up with stuff just because it's just popping into my head. And then I have, you know, something will get triggered. I'll get some kind of vivid vision or revelation, and then I kind of move into the direction of all these things that I've created, and like, how can this thing apply? Or like, oh yeah, that drawing I did last year, that'd be so perfect to apply to this. And so Photoshop's been really helpful because I can just come up with collages of ideas pretty quickly, and I've been less invested in making just finished digital works because I'm so much enamored by this painting process. So I'll just come up with a bunch of stuff that I can kind of assemble just to establish the composition of something, and then use it as the reference to start a painting. Yeah, and then sometimes from a painting, there'll be something that happens that I didn't plan or expect. It just kind of appears in the process. And I'm like, oh, that's a cool little sample that I can then run with somewhere else at another time. Or if I'm working on something else, I'd be like, oh yeah, that painting, that little detail in the background, that would be so cool to like expand upon and bring it into this one. And so there's this kind of self-referencing feedback loop that can happen with all these ideas. And yeah, there's elements that I've experienced internally in these intentional medicine ceremonies where it's like, it's been one of my most incredible art teachers, and it's shown me certain processes and certain formulas that are kind of foolproof at this point. Like it's like, but also infinitely variable. But it's like there's a kind of underlying architecture to the psychedelic experience that I've somehow been given the keys to, and seen that it's like there's this module, there's this one, and there's this one. Each one of those can have an infinite set of variations, but if you combine them, they kind of replicate a quality of this experience. It's like I've kind of broken it down into the nuts and bolts of the, you know, the architecture of this kind of hyperspace experience. They've kind of shown, it's been shown to me in these components, that it's like if you get the component and you master those components, now those components are like Lego bricks, and you can make an infinite set of variations. That's kind of how it's been presented to me. And so it's been a lot easier to just initiate and spark a process, because now I've kind of got that figured out. And then it's like, yeah, it's been relatively successful every time I move in those directions, because I've got these kind of principles that I've learned to start from as a kind of creative seed.
And that quality of pareidolia, or kind of like bringing order out of chaos, or starting with some kind of abstract stimulus, is that a big part of your process?
Yeah, that's like one of the modules, you know, and it's such a kind of predominant part of that psychedelic experience for seemingly a lot of people.
Yeah.
Once definitely. I kind of accessed that, I was like, oh, this has infinite variations, but it's also, you know, a very valuable expression. And it's also something that I can get into relatively easily and quickly without an attachment to the outcome. I can just start just playing, and then incredible stuff reveals itself. It's a really fun creative process.
Yeah, so that's when you create stains or textures or patterns, and then you pull images out of it. It's kind of like looking at cloud formations and being like, oh, I see a drag.
It's like interpreting discernible imagery in organic chaos. And the more I get into that process, the more fascinated I am by just an entire Rolodex of textures and shapes and forms and, you know, color palettes and all these things that I can just reference and have in my mind, but also in my, you know, my folders on my computer. I'll just scour the internet and just find brain coral and leaf patterns and rock textures and, you know, like computer schematics and anything. Just all these things can be referenced to just play with in ways that aren't necessarily like, I need to make this look identically to a computer schematic, but it's like, oh, just, you know, angled lines and blocks and indentations and embossing and grommets and, you know, just textures, just things that are just fun to just move into, you know, sensitive chaos of just like ethereal, wispy, cloud-like motion, and just all these things that I can just be enamored by, just visual phenomena, and just amassing them in my Photoshop folders and in my mind, that just become a part of my visual repertoire, that as I'm working, it's just like, oh, my brush wants to move this way and it wants to wiggle like brain coral, and let's make that really deeply embossed with light emanating from inside the grooves, and or just like whatever wants to happen. There's this kind of repertoire of textural infinity that I like to just tap into and texture map on the surface of discernible forms.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's a big part of an artist's personal journey, is kind of developing their personal library of either things that they kind of like have a relationship to, like certain subjects or textures or patterns, and also like physically having a library of like sketches and stuff that you can draw upon. I resonate with that a lot for my own process. A lot of it's kind of like constructing or collaging different elements, like things I might make, you know, I made a year back that then finds its place in a painting a year later, and things like that.
Yeah, I have a lot of fun with that. I mean, there are times where I'm like really actively creating, and there's other times where it's all just research and development.
Yeah, or
Like
play even.
Yeah, I really get into it, or I'm just on a trip of like, wow, I'm just like so into orchids. Let's just like totally investigate orchids or certain plants, and then I'm like finding cool, inspiring textures and color palettes, and I'll amass them in my asset archives. But then it's also just embedding itself into my consciousness that just gets channeled at another time where I'm not deliberately referencing or looking up that thing like, oh, I need to look at it so that I can replicate it exactly. Instead, it's just like becomes a part of the tapestry internally, and just comes about in a channeled way in the moment.
Cool. Have you ever struggled with creative blocks?
Yeah.
And so
but I've also
with that
learned to just not be hard on myself about that, or get, that somehow this is some horrible disservice to the world if I'm not, proficient and productive at all times. Like somehow I'm like failing on my duty here. It's like, okay, my attention needs to be elsewhere right now, and I don't need to be, full, directing some scolding at myself internally. It's just like, okay, it's not there right now. That's okay also. And I've been fortunate enough to be in this position where, I'm supported by my art in a way where, I don't have to show up at the office at a certain hour to make sure that I'm fulfilling my quotas. It's like, and that's been deliberate too. I've chosen that. I felt that that's an important part of this commitment. Yeah, so far it's been working out great.
Yeah, I'd say so. Cool, man. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. Anything you feel is pertinent to share? Any hard-won pieces of advice that you would want to bestow to your younger self or to somebody who might be listening?
Just trust in life, trust in yourself, trust in source intelligence, trust. We're here for so much greater potential than we even have the imagination for, and live a life that keeps you in contact with that, and it will reveal itself in time.
Right on.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, thanks so much for this conversation, and thanks to everybody who's been listening. Sending you all much love.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the podcast. I am the DFT Elf. Escape into your dimension. New episodes of the Creativity and Consciousness podcast drop each week. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you'd like to stay connected and join a like-minded community, hop in the Telegram group where we discuss the latest episodes and ideas they spark. Sending you instant love and gratitude for being part of this journey.